This is a podcast by the News Minute, and you are listening to South Central.
Hello and welcome to South Central, a TNM podcast where we put the South at the center. I'm Dhanya Rajendran, your weekly host of this podcast, which drops every Friday. And joining me in the studio is my co-host, Pooja Prasanna, the reporting head of the News Minute and the anchor of the popular show, Let Me Explain.
Hi, Dhanya. I've come armed with a lot of Gen Z language and this for people who can't watch and this and what this.
So I have actually been using Gen Z language quite a bit. When I go to schools and colleges, they don't listen, right? I mean, why should they listen to me? So I tell them, don't be sus about everyone. I've been doing this for quite a while. Therefore, this is not new for me.
Infiltration, huh?
Yeah. And like you are very mid. You don't have Riz, Pooja.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Okay.
So you no longer get this from me.
And in this episode, I'm also going to read out a few letters from our listeners.
Yeah.
Do write to us at southcentral@thenewsminute.com. I will be reading letters once a month. Okay, so before we go to the headlines, two things. One, I hope you have read the cracker of a story by our colleague Avdesh in News Laundry, where he tracked that truck with stones which was parked near the protest site. The Solicitor General and the Additional Solicitor General had told the court that this truck was just there, but Avdesh has tracked down that the truck was actually in Delhi Police's custody. The Delhi Police, of course, has given a fact check. It's become their job now. Fact check, no pellet guns. Hospital reports come still, fact check, no pellet guns. So please do read that story. You all have been sharing a lot of our work and News Laundry's work. We are thankful for that. And as a token of our appreciation, we are sending out some stickers to all our subscribers with just the delivery charges. So you have to just pay the delivery charge. These are stickers that you can put on your car, your scooter, your laptop, or you could even pass this to your friends and family to spread the word about independent media. Like I said last week, this protest and how the mainstream media covered it has clearly showed us the necessity of independent media in this country. And if you are not a subscriber yet, then we are giving a 20% off on subscriptions for both News Laundry and the News Minute together. So avail the subscription and get your stickers.
I think it's a great week to be proud of being, supporters of independent media. So you can make that more public. Tell everyone how you are keeping us going by your contributions, by your subscription, etc. We'll start with the headlines for the week. Looking at Kerala first, Kerala police booked TG Mohandas over his derogatory comments against CJP protesters. In two different videos, he said the protesters at Jantar Mantar would have been shot and killed if he was in control. He also said the women who were part of the protest liked to be raped and would not even have complained if it had happened.
I just want to say one thing. There are only two times in my life when when an RSS spokesperson has directly reached out and sent a reaction. The first one was a story during COVID, or after COVID rather. The second was this time. In the night, the RSS spokesperson sent a press release saying that TG Mohandas has nothing to do with us, as in he does not have any leadership role in the RSS, but he was very much the intellectual cell head of the BJP. Yeah, I mean, that speaks for itself.
Yeah, but also we've said this time and again, how RSS keeps it ambiguous, right? You're a member, you're not a member, we don't have membership. So anytime you don't like something, you can say, we have nothing to do with it.
And this TG Mohandas has a big following in Kerala. I know a lot of people in their 50s, 60s, etc. who religiously listen to him. What kind of poison are you injecting in people's mind?
Personality cult apathy candidate selection, CPIM's unsparing audit of Kerala route. By personalizing the campaign and centering it around Comrade Pinarayi Vijayan, we unwittingly gave an opportunity to the UDF to conduct a targeted campaign against him, says a review report by the CPIM Central Committee. Let's move on to Karnataka. Suspense continues over Karnataka cabinet expansion as Congress delays final decision. Suspense over the expansion of the Karnataka cabinet continued with the Congress High Command once again deferring a final decision on the list of legislators to be included. It's not interesting otherwise, but the only thing amusing is poor DK Shivkumar must be dreading going to Delhi now.
No, first Rahul Gandhi took him to detention center because they all got detained together. And now Rahul Gandhi is in parliament. You saw DK Shivkumar tweeted watching Rahul Gandhi.
So he must be thinking, I'm safer here. If I go near parliament, I'll get arrested again. So that's that. CWRC asked Karnataka to release 3,500 cusecs of Kaveri water to Tamil Nadu state to challenge. The CWRC has directed Karnataka to ensure the flow of 3,500 cusecs, like I said, of Kaveri water for 15 days, starting this Wednesday, prompting the state to prepare an appeal before the CWMA amid strong opposition from the BJP.
So there are protests already in Mandya, Mysore, etc. Farmers groups, political parties, etc. protesting, saying this water cannot be released. In that row, the Karnataka Chief Minister D.K. Shivakumar has invited Tamil Nadu Chief Minister Vijay to come and inspect how bad the water situation is in the Kaveri dams by helicopter. Vijay is coming to Bengaluru on August 3rd, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Another headline from Bengaluru: restaurants warn of Swiggy Zomato boycott over discounts and commission. Restaurants associations allege that high commissions, deep discounts and multiple deductions by food delivery platforms are hurting restaurant profits. They have demanded a fairer and more transparent partnership model. Let's look at Tamil Nadu next. DVAC books former DMK Minister Senthil Balaji, conducts searches at 41 locations across Tamil Nadu. The searches were conducted after a corruption case was registered against Senthil Balaji, the former managing director and officials of Tamil Nadu State Marketing Corporation, that is TASMAC.
There's a second case against him after the TVK came to power.
EVMs from Kolattur to undergo technical checks following MK Stalin's application. The Election Commission will verify EVMs from 14 polling stations in Kolattur after an application by DMK chief MK Stalin, who lost the constituency in the 2026 Assembly election.
So there are lots of election petitions, but this one is about the technical faults in the EVM, which is why it's been taken up.
Moving on to Andhra, 16,000 schools in Andhra run with single teacher. This is according to data by the Union Ministry of Education. This was given in Rajya Sabha on Wednesday in response to a question raised by MP Randeep Singh Surjewala on teacher vacancies and single teacher schools across the country. Eviction looms over 258 shop owners at Vijayawada's Lenin Centre. Traders fear loss of livelihood and customer base as Vijayawada Municipal Corporation moves to clear Canal Bund encroachments in compliance with an Andhra Pradesh High Court order. Moving on to Telangana, the High Court orders removal of Hydra chief for repeat violations of court order and not giving apology. The court had severely reprimanded the Hydra boss, warning that it could direct the army to take him into custody, to place him in the army barracks for repeatedly violating court orders.
But Revant Reddy has said that it's a prerogative of the state government to actually appoint bureaucrats in whatever positions. So they are going to appeal against this.
Also, good time to watch and read some of the work done by Anjana Meenakshi, a colleague who's been following what Hydra has been doing from its inception. Couple of national headlines before we wrap up. Anti-paper leak bill likely to be introduced in Rajya Sabha.
It's already been passed in the Lok Sabha.
Yeah. Anti-paper leak bill likely to be introduced in Rajya Sabha. This is going to come up. This is some remedy that the Modi government is trying after the CJP protests. In the parliament itself, no shots were fired at students, claims Union Minister Jitendra Singh.
This in spite of so many people getting injured by pellet guns. But look at the wordplay. He says no shots fired. That could mean gunshots. While there's only one story by the Hindu which now says that in one of the medical records, it says gunshot. He says no shots fired at students.
Yeah.
They can get away by saying that whatever shots were fired were at other people.
Yeah. Assam floods death count rises to 75. Over 3 lakh people still affected. A total of 622 villages have been impacted by severe flooding. Multiple agencies, including the Army, Air Force, NDRF and SDRF, along with fire and emergency services, civil volunteers, continue to carry out relief and rescue operations. The situation is pretty bad in Assam, but I'm sure the Chief Minister has better things to do, like vilifying protesters of CJP.
Ouch. Well, thank you for that, Pooja. Okay, so we move to the first topic of the day, as in the only topic of the day, but we'll look at a lot of things. And I know that we normally discuss news events happening in South India, but what's happened in Delhi in the last week, the repercussions of that are still being felt across India because cases are being filed against students despite the government's assurance that the cases will be withdrawn. We're also seeing the Delhi police write to Meta and other social media platforms asking for name, address, etc. of people who have social media accounts and who have apparently, allegedly heard the sentiments of Narendra Modi ji and the rest of the cabinet. Therefore, to talk about this and more, we are joined by the editor of The Wire, Seema Chishti. Seema, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
And representing the Gen Z generation and someone who's done really astounding work during these whole protests is Vedanta Agarwal of Peak TV. Vedanta, thank you very much.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So before we go to the discussion, I just want to point out Vedanta's colleague Priyanshi was on Hafta last week, which is the News Laundries podcast. And as Abhinandan said, all the three organizations here, The Wire, Peak TV, and us, we are all dependent on our viewers and our listeners or readers subscribing or donating. So do that. I think you also have a Razorpay page, which is there on your Instagram account, right, Vedanta?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Yeah. And Wire also has done stellar work, especially on the pellet guns. But Seema, despite everything, the police is continuing to deny. In fact, in the parliament yesterday, the minister said no gunshots on students.
So I think that is so much this government's default mode. It is such a rehearsed playbook that they keep trying till the end to put on record that nothing's happened. They hope that these are all just media bubbles, social media, small things that will go away, and nothing is on record. I think they'll keep trying till it becomes impossible to defend. And then there'll be a small affidavit. There'll be something on page 3 that admits it. But we must also take note. On the other side, there's a desire to flex on this. So the CRPF chief goes out and says that do all this fearlessly. He's quoted as saying, I want to know what fearlessly means for an armed combat force which taxpayers pay for, which is mandated constitutionally to protect its citizens. It's not personal, security for people in power at that time. It is meant to protect the Indian constitution and the Indian people. So I think there's a bit of the twin thing happening, but it's clear that the government is very scared and doesn't know how to play this thing about being brutal on protesters. So far, it's been a thing. There's a lot of demonstrative brutality. So even on Noida workers, even on on the young environmentalists who are 17, 18 at India Gate, if you remember in winter in Delhi, who had come, they've swooped on them within seconds. And, they made it a point to bash their heads in and just take them away. So that's also done to show that don't come out here again. And to tell their base, it's a lot of catering to the base, that this is how we treat people who are like this. Mr. Modi's phrase of "हम लोगों को उनके कपड़ों से पहचान जाते हैं." You should recognize protesters from their clothes, is what he said during the NRC-CA protest. So I think that is also code, all these videos. But now they are really scared because this generation is not wearing typical clothes, is their vote base, a lot of it. And a lot of them, as we know now, are progeny of their leaders. So that mix, the fact that they come from all parts of the political demographic spectrum is bewildering them. So I think this is their default mode, that no, we've done nothing wrong. We're right. But on the other hand, to put out a very defiant CRPF guy, to say all this. So we're watching a government wondering which side they should eventually weigh down on. Something like this, as Vedant may say.
Yeah. No, Vedant, you have been there at the protest site for many, many days, even before everybody else swooped in. I think a lot of the media attention was after Sonam Wangchuk came in, and it peaked when he was taken away, right? Now there's a lot of talk about how Gen Z protest is different, etc. But what was your experience while you were covering it? What did you see? And now there's a lot of attention over the language which was used during the protest, right?
So I think for starters, now we are seeing a kind of an outreach to the Gen Z, so-called Gen Z. But what is happening is that now, just 2 days back, we saw Basri Swaraj and Dipender Hooda sort of use words like Dilulu and Silulu in Parliament, which I feel you are trying to you're trying to make this into an urban elite movement, which it wasn't. To say that this was a homogeneous lot, all of them speaking one language, coming from English speaking schools, wearing a certain kind of clothes. I think that is also it's not right. And, this kind of one size fits all outreach to the Gen Z that we are seeing from our politicians and, even journalists, etc. as well. That is very unfortunate. You had people from tier 2, tier 3 cities. You had people from, of course, English speaking schools, but also from vernacular boards. You had people from the south of India. You had people from the northeast. You had people from Bihar, UP, Haryana, Punjab. It was no homogeneous lot. All of them didn't say Dilulu and Silulu. So I think that is one thing that I really want to point out, that we must acknowledge the diversity of this movement as well. There were people from different ideologies, different educational backgrounds, different castes, different classes. So that is one thing. You had protesters from all kind of backgrounds. So that I think is very important. Secondly, I think there was a time when a lot of our seniors from the industry also said, "Why are you covering these protests?" When nothing much was happening, when it wasn't really in the news cycle, so to speak. But there were still people turning up every single day in hundreds. And, this kind of mobilization, at least we haven't seen in our lives. The fact that you have genuine people turning up on a Monday, on a Tuesday, working professionals turning up at Jantar Mantar, despite their parents telling them not to go, despite the news of, lathi charge, police brutality. That was, of course, later. But even when it wasn't a part of the news cycle, you still had youngsters, working professionals, students lying at home and turning up at Jantar Mantar. And that was a story for us. So, which is why every single day we made sure that even if it was just for an hour, we made sure we went and we marked the protest. Because also, I mean, just because mainstream media isn't covering it doesn't mean we can normalize hunger strikes. I mean, a man is sitting there on a hunger strike, along with him students. They may be ISA students, they may be SFI students, doesn't matter, but they're still Indian students who are sitting there on a hunger strike day after day, and in the heat, in the rain. And we cannot normalize that, and we cannot have a situation where we say, oh, simply because there is no police brutality, simply because there aren't hundreds and thousands of students, I mean, that doesn't mean we won't cover the story, which is why we decided to cover the story every single day, even if it meant that we'll go and do a small video in front of Mr. Sonam Wangchuk and just tell people that this man here, a world-renowned scientist, a world-renowned educator, innovator, is sitting on a hunger strike, and along with him, 6 Indian students are sitting on a hunger strike, which is why we decided to cover the protest so relentlessly, perhaps. And one, just to add to what Seema ma'am said about the government being scared, there was this situation on the 20th of July where my camera person and I were caught almost in a kind of a crossfire, because after 3 p.m., it was clear that the police have gotten orders from the top ki kuch bhi karke just clear the roads. We don't want this situation in central Delhi. Clear the roads no matter what. So there was a situation where this Sansad Marg, which is one of the most important roads of India, you had a situation where tear gas was being fired from both sides, and you had protesters sort of running for their lives. They didn't know where to go because there was barricading on both sides. There were tear gas shells being fired from both sides, and protesters were just running from one barricade to another, not knowing what to do. And there was a masjid. There's a masjid at the back of, near the Western Court, which is also on this Sansad Marg Road, and you had all these protesters take shelter there, and my camera person and I had to go to this masjid and kind of take shelter there for 5-10 minutes because the police had completely lost it. It was clear that they had gotten orders that these roads need to be cleared. Use batons, use lathis, use tear gas, but clear the roads of central Delhi. That was a very sort of palpable sentiment post 3 p.m. On the 20th of July, which is why we're seeing this kind of police brutality. Now, which is why they resorted to even pellet guns, rubber guns. We spoke to multiple victims. This protester named Nutan, who said that, the police pinned a group of women to a wall at the LIC building. So not even on the main road. They cornered these protesters, pinned them to a wall and fired rubber bullets. And she showed me that, she said, I have permanent damage to my ear. There may be potentially hearing loss as well. So by that time, it was almost like a frenzy-like situation where the police was resorting to anything to clear the central roads of Delhi. That's what we caught on ground on the 20th.
I think one thing we can safely say after we hear Vedanta recount what happened is that the instruction might have been to clear the road. The intent was something much more sinister. It is to make sure, because if you want to just clear, you will fire from one side. You are trapping protesters. It is cruelty. It is that repressed rage that perhaps the police personnel at that point felt. But also to teach lesson, because BJP lost the narrative for the first time in I don't know how long, right? Because yes, other protests were there, they were big, but they were still limited to certain sections. Here you have people cutting across sections, like you mentioned, Vedanta, coming out. So much so, I'm hearing that there is one BJP leader's daughter who was also injured. She's receiving treatment at a hospital in Delhi, and she's been given orders from her father and the party to not speak to the media, because imagine the kind of loss of face for BJP where one of its own leader's daughter is part of this and got injured.
But I think today Al Jazeera has an interview with another daughter of a BJP leader. She lives abroad, I think, and she joined protests.
Yeah. So they're not able to convince their own leaders, children.
I think Seema will have an interesting take on all the lamenting on social media by the right-wingers that, oh my God, why are our children turning out to be left? Sridhar Vembu, the Zoho head, has put out a long thing about how he was, he had a Marxist teacher in an RSS school, but the RSS never taught him about the RSS, but the Marxist teacher taught him about communism. Etc., etc. And of course,
clearly not efficiently enough.
Yeah, others very badly lamenting that why are we not taught better? Why are our children turning like this?
So I thought the pithiest thing was from Shefali Vaidya, full lament mode. I mean, pro max about our children and why do we find the children of communists and liberals not becoming RSS and right wing, and why are our children and using such abusive language, etc. I think they just got sort of in their desire to kind of distort what India is, what time does to people, to just a sense of history about how generations move, how they revolt, how that is inherent in youngsters. They've just sort of bought their own Kool-Aid of, moving towards 1,000-year Reich, which they keep talking about, next 1,000 years, 2047, that they forgot that people have agency. And I think, God bless these children, for coming out, stepping out and speaking up, despite all that must be discussed at their dining tables, etc. But that's the story of the world. I mean, I don't want to speak about Engels, the son of a factory owner, a rich man who just squandered all his riches in ensuring that the Das Kapital is published. So, history is replete with stuff like this. Who is Buddha? He was the son of a king. And look at what he kind of birthed. So I think the BJP again displays complete lack of awareness of political science, of history, a sense of how people should be allowed to think freely. And good for these young people, the not so young people who are stepping out and speaking their mind.
I think this entire Sanskar spin that is being given, we all know how much BJP cares for Sanskar or for women's dignity in the first place. The Prime Minister is the same man who'd called Sonia Gandhi Jersey cow. I think Rahul Gandhi and Priyanka Gandhi were also called some half-bred or something to that effect. 50 crore girlfriend. In the parliament, we had a BJP MP call somebody a katwa, and we need to keep saying this, as Mahua Moitra said, repeat people, because they've expunged it from the records. They will at one point possibly even take down the videos of it, but we need to keep reminding the public, but this is a party. Prostitute is something that a sitting minister had used, and everybody uses it against us. They are talking about women's dignity today. That is just a sideshow. It's a distraction from, when parents are reminded, they're told you're not being sanskari enough. Control, that is code word for control your kids when you still can. If they're earning, there's not much you can do, but shame your kids. So, kind of control them as much as you can. And what sanskar, Mohan Bhagwat has given a list of, I think, 11 celebrities who endorsed it, almost like a hit list.
Organizer has given a list, yeah.
has given, sorry.
No, my point is, I don't use abusive words in real life also. Therefore, I accept one word, but occasionally. But I'm saying I can then advise somebody else saying, don't use abuses. You've lived on abuses. Your party has abused people left day and night. And then now you're advising others. That's a hypocrisy also.
No, there is also a slightly, I don't know.
I mean, people can be angry in different ways, right?
Exactly.
And they can express their anger in different ways. We can't be policing people all the time, saying you must use this kind of language only. And I was actually laughing at a particular anchor who has been writing about the Gali gang every day. Most abusive person I've seen in my life. And is lamenting about, oh my God, how this Gali gang.
Yeah. But Danya, I just want to add a little bit of nuance to this as well. Profanity, abuse cannot be seen without context, right? And these are people who are not abusing from a point of power. Whereas the ones that we mentioned, be it Modi, be it other people in that ecosystem, are abusing other people from a position of power. There is a large difference between the two. And also, like when you're selling off women, Muslim women online, whether you use a certain word or not, isn't that far more dangerous than some young people using in an act of resistance? Because I was talking to a psychologist and she was telling me how in protests such as these, so large and with so much of spirit, it is perhaps safer for people to use profanity because that gives that intense anger an outlet, because otherwise it could turn into violence. So she was saying, actually, I would endorse this.
Vedanta, tell me, you must be in touch with a lot of people who were at the protest, right? Is there worry that they will get booked now? Because we are seeing visuals on a daily basis of police picking up someone or the other.
Yeah, so we spoke to multiple protesters, and these people were actually going to the protest, and they were almost harassed by cops at different metro stations. So, of course, videos coming in from Jamia, Nizamuddin, all these places where students, their phones were checked. In fact, we've put out that report where a student is telling us that she was boarding the metro, and when she reached the metro station, she had a placard in her hand, and the cop asked her where she's going, and then checked her phone, checked if she's part of any, and that's what the cop told her, that I want to see if you're part of any anti-national groups. The cop said that I want to see if you're part of any anti-national groups, checked her WhatsApp. I mean, on what grounds are cops checking people's WhatsApp, their private chats? I mean, it's a complete travesty, the way these protesters were simply going to the protest. Their phones were checked, they were harassed, they were asked whose daughters. This young woman told her that I was asked what my parents do, where do they live, are you a native of Delhi? Who has given these cops the right to interrogate? People who were simply, boarding a public transport. So, these are the kind of stories that are coming in. And just to add to what Seema ma'am said about labels, and, now I think what this movement has also done is that even the trolls will now have to reinvent themselves, because, these kind of these labels become redundant, anti-national, Khalistani, and Gali gang, and then calling women who participate in the protest characterless, like Kangana Ranaut did. So, I mean, these people can see through it now. So I think even the trolls will have to kind of come up with better stuff, because now everybody can see through it. Also, because all these people who were doing these primetime shows night after night, trying to prove that this is a Khalistani gang. Look at how they sort of changed goalposts. First, they were like, "Oh, this entire protest is anti-national." Then they thought that they've taken a very nuanced position that, "Oh, we stand by the students, but they are the right people at the wrong place." So then they said that, "Oh, this is deep state, Dipke, and whatever." And so then they thought that we're taking a very nuanced position. And by the end of it, they had all those people on their shows. The same people who said they were anti-national, Khalistani, and all of that. So look at how they shifted goalposts through the protest. And just one thing, that there were moments from this protest. Nobody, I mean, for example, when Shabana Azmi visited those protesters as Comrade Kaifi Azmi's daughter, nobody could call her. Nobody could say, "Oh, she's a Pakistani, and Javed Akhtar and Shabana Azmi should go to Pakistan." The usual kind of thing that these people say the moment Shabana Azmi or Javed Akhtar say something in national interest, or for the students, etc. Nobody said that, because that moment was so powerful, of her being there with those students as a senior communist, or as a senior activist, somebody who's been on a hunger strike herself. That moment of her being there with those students was so powerful. Nobody could call her Pakistani, and nobody would buy that after having been privy to that moment. Or that moment where Junaid was standing next to somebody from Nagpur, an RSS person, and I interviewed those two people. Those people came from Nagpur. They went to Shakhas, and they were there standing next to Junaid, serving food to protesters. So you can't discount these moments anymore, or discredit these moments simply by saying that, "Oh, this is a Pakistani thing or a deep state or whatever," because those moments were so powerful. So I think what this protest has done is also kind of dismantle all these labels that were put on dissenters, protesters. So now maybe like I said, the trolls will have to come up with newer stuff.
I think, sorry, just to think what he's saying about New Year stuff. I saw some video yesterday about, I think it was the Haryana Chief Minister. He was giving some job certificates, etc. And they actually had people who were getting jobs and all who were pro-Haryana government holding up placards in praise of Modi and Saini. So, you see, protest as a metaphor is something they're trying to appropriate and say that we are protesting for. I was completely bewildered and I saw it 2-3 times. But they were standing there and saying, like salutary things about Saini and Modi. So, and the other thing I want to just cite ROFL Gandhi, Sunil Sharma, who's I think the finest analyst this side of the Yamuna on politics. And he had this very prescient thing to say on the Anurag minus Verma podcast that I heard yesterday. He said at this protest, people came from, there were Malayali speakers, there were Telugu speakers, there were speakers in Haryanvi, in Punjabi. The crowds would not even understand what they're saying. They would all get like 3-4 minutes on the stage. This is before Dharmendra Pradhan resigned and all. This is in the build-up. And they wouldn't understand, but he was imitating the Andhra guy. And he said, he would say, Modi, and they say, haan, bhai, tu sahi bol raha hai, tu bilkul theek bol raha hai. They would just chime. And so there was this solidarity building, which is incredible, in this Hindi heartland, in a protest which was dominated, as it were, by Punjabis, Haryanvis, which is the whole, BJP's heartland contest, the battlegrounds, the entire delimitation bill is being brought in to empower them. I think to just see that this acceptance of diversity has led, I think this will have wholesale dismantling properties. It's almost as if they've poured a good acid on bullshit wood that had been coming around and trying to kind of distort the whole space and trying to just render, just trying to take India apart, right? Divide India along all kinds of crazy vertical lines at a time when there was so much horizontal solidarity. So I think this is like they'll have to really go back to their strategists or whatever and find out what's happening.
And imagine the kind of fear this puts in a party and an ecosystem that only thrives on othering people, right? And here you have people from every section coming together, which is why I think they're using language as a tool to kind of delegitimize this entire movement, because now they're just...
So just a small point about language. See, when we talk about saying, or when that scholar you spoke to who said that profanities should come out, it's not as if we support profanities. And I'm not even doing a whataboutery thing that if Modi says Vidva to Sonia Gandhi, I'm entitled to say that. See, a lot of the profanities and the bad words, if you like, all the asterisk words that are used, they are used fully in conjunction with violence. It's with death threats. It's with rape threats. What are these words? The words being used on the worst of placards are not wishing death on anybody. They are not even saying Murdabad, which is like death to whatever, death to Spotify or whatever. They're not doing that. They are mockery. And I think to kind of equate mockery with the use of demeaning words, and I would like to point out here, I forgot to point it out in an article, that the Home Minister himself has said Sala twice in Parliament in Lok Sabha. That has probably been taken down. There's a Home Minister himself. What are we talking about abuse? Also, the use of the word termite is not abusive. The Chief Justice of India, the Honorable Chief Justice of India, used cockroaches, parasites. Is that not abuse? That is demeaning human beings. What else is abuse? So even if you were to judge words by what they mean, it cannot be that I, in extremely polished, controlled language, bludgeon 20 people to death. So we must kind of be, so it's not as if that I advocate that we all change our lexicon and we start abusing left, right and center. But I think to understand what kind of abuse is also being hurled down there and by the topmost authorities, what else is going to flow down? If everywhere there is screaming, shouting, you're not letting people complete their sentences, and that is the norm. That is actually playing like when we were kids, all of us boring Gen Xers, there used to be like a radio station playing some music playing. Right now it's TV news channels, right? In a lot of homes. What is the soundtrack of that? So obviously, there's evolution, younger people innovate and are better than they're going to take it to a new level. So we've kind of, fruits of a poison tree as well at one level.
On this whole abuse thing, I was on the ground for 36 days. I didn't meet too many abusive protesters. This whole thing is also a kind of a distortion of the kind of people who were present there. I mean, look at what the symbols of the protests were. They were carrying books, they were carrying the Constitution, they were carrying the Tiranga, they were carrying, and very innovatively made posters. So I think it's just kind of cherry picking not one or two, but like a very small minority of protesters who would have been abusive. Otherwise, I don't think I met too many abusive protesters. They were genuine people with genuine concerns, and of course, there were all sorts of memes and those kind of things on posters, and provocative posters. Yes, they were provocative and bordering on crude, and they could make people uncomfortable, but they weren't abusive as such. And I didn't interview too many people whose bits I had to cut because they said something even kind of bordering on being abusive. So I think it's a complete distortion of the narrative. I don't think the protesters, they're a very small minority, would have been abusive, but not a majority of them. And also, there was a very clear distinction. Why the government got particularly rattled later was because there was this crowd on the roads, on the Sansad Marg, which was very different from the crowd that was inside Jantar Mantar, which was a designated protest site. Here you had people, and we must also sort of put this on record, that there were people from the protesting crowd who pelted stones on cops, etc. as well. Of course, it came after the police brutality, but there were these sort of anti-social elements also who maybe were there to give a bad name to the protest or whatever. But there were these people also who were not inside Jantar Mantar but were on these roads. And later you had seen that the organizers said that we have nothing to do with that crowd, and those people have been planted by the BJP. There's no evidence to prove that. But this crowd was very different from actually, the genuine students who were actually present inside Jantar Mantar, who were raising valid questions, who were not abusive at all.
But Seema, I think we should go back to the political reactions of the BJP, right? Now, I think this is where the BJP really excels at duplicity, at doublespeak. On one side, you have the Prime Minister saying, France, we will look for reforms, we promise reforms. On the other side, you have an MP calling the protesters gutter. The minister says these are anti-national forces. There's a top ideologist who will come on TV saying that these are all not the Gen Z who will build Bharat. A low-level ideologist will come on Malayalam channels and say that I would have shot these people or they would have liked to be raped. Then the street-level goon, which is the Bajrang Dal and all your Hindu Dals, will go and beat up people. And the one who's the lowest in the food chain, which is a troll on social media, will use these videos to further, traumatize people. So there's so much of doublespeak. The Prime Minister is promising reform, but rest everybody is speaking in a different language. Does the BJP think that people are not seeing this?
I think there are a couple of things here. One is not just double speak, this treble, quadruple speak. That is because the ecosystem is so large now that you can see it in all its splendor and beauty. You're able to see what the RSS guys think, what their sidekicks think, what the BJP thinks, what the BJP in Delhi thinks. So all their sides are exposed. And also there is a state of crisis there, because if you look at the two big pan-India mobilization, I'm excluding, say, all the left, progressive, other mobilizations like the workers' movements and the farmers' movements. If you look at the anti-emergency big protest mobilization that eventually led to the downfall of Mrs. Gandhi's government in 1977, and if you look at the Anna Hazare, the spine of that was very much the RSS. It slowly, covertly, and then overtly was very much RSS organized and pushed. This is the first real pushback that the RSS is bombed by. They like saying for everything, oh, they won the election. They won the election with the RSS campaign. Oh, they lost because RSS did not campaign. There's this overarching narrative they build about themselves. That narrative has taken a beating, so they don't know what to do. But I think more significantly, since the 90s, late 80s, it is the BJP which does mobs and crowds. They're the ones who bring people on the street, right? No one else can. You dismiss the left organization or you dismiss the DMK and say, oh, they are cadre parties. They come to Brigade Ground or they come in Chennai somewhere because that's a segmented thing. We're the ones who can we do crowds, we do mobs, we do outrage. We're the ones who are filming people being lynched, etc. Right? That ecosystem or that thinking. Suddenly there's a crowd that is beset on the heart of the national capital while Parliament is in session. It's a complete intelligence collapse. So all this 007, these music wala videos with Ajit Doval, IB guys, man, this is like Dhurandhar. Where is all that, yaar? Where is all that? If Pahalgam was not bad enough, it is that same system which is presiding over nearly 1 lakh people walking. Solo people walking, paying for their own tickets and coming of their own volition within, say, 7 or 8 kilometers of Jantar Mantar. There were nearly 1L people there that day on a working day. They were dismissed as the hamper, weekend protesters, etc. Right? So for them, it's like a big setback to this whole thing of Amit Shah Brooks no nonsense. He walks in and he dismantles Jammu and Kashmir in a day. 370 gone. Ayodhya done. Babri Masjid down. Mandir is up. Everything's sorted. We have everybody under control. That control narrative, the mob narrative, and the ideas that these people are pushing and of their own volition. So I think even Instagram is kind of overrated in this, in the way that we like to credit all the global opinion on Gaza to TikTok. In large part, sure, it's finding expression in good tools. But if there was no Instagram, there would have been some other means through which this intense anger and despair at wages not having risen. The median wages in the country have not risen in the past 15 years. And look at where inflation is. Highest employment rates amongst all emerging economies. Over 16% unemployment rate amongst qualified youth. In fact, you're told to not study more because the chances of finding jobs reduce the more you study. That's what we're talking about while China is at the head of the AI race. And once in a while, we have a moment and we say, hey guys, why are we doing food delivery apps? Tum fundamental research karo. How will you do fundamental research? If the government is only interested in kind of reshaping India in the face of a Hindutva republic kind of a framing, and this is clearly your demographic just saying that this is rubbish. In fact, I saw the New York Times article yesterday just said that we don't learn anything in school. There are these useless vice chancellors. What's with the syllabus? Schools are asked to do Man Ki Baat. They're issued memos to do this, that, and the other. Follow this, follow that. What's the syllabus? What are the students studying? What is happening? What is this 4-year program? So I think this overall collapse has got really fine focused in paper leaks, which gave it a very potent and a very sharp economic focus as well. The amount they spend on coaching, the amount of time that is spent, that 28 students have been forced to take their life in just, a few months, a few weeks. That's what we're talking about. So I think all these intense crises of people's lives just found this symbol in paper leak, continuous, relentless, and almost rehearsed and happening and no one cares. And it has just now, and the reaction to that has bombed the BJP. And I think in a lot of ways, we have to thank big media for that, because big media, by not being the vehicle which can safety valve these things, we can allow for feedback, which can allow for, these guys would have hunted for a mic, right? They would have gone to a mic and said, sir, people used to come to our offices in olden times. I think you'll also remember when we were all with big media, they would come with press releases and, madam, please, isko chhap dijiye. They're so happy when it is carried even on page 11 that, you mention somebody's name and there's a 200-word story. That's what giving expression meant. All that is going to get squashed. A completely blatantly false narrative is being peddled. Everybody's unemployed in your house and you're seeing this, we've distributed 30,000 jobs. So I think,
and I think that is, Pooja has been opening her mouth to say something. I'm going to let her finish.
I feel like Gen Z. I have been stifled for too long.
Yes, talk, Pooja, talk.
No, I was just reminded when you spoke of big media houses, 2011 to 2026, look at the change, right? Times now. At that time, people were lining up to speak to us during the Anna Hazare movement. And today, the same times now, reporters are being heckled and asked to not report because they're saying you don't report, you distort. So that, I think, is also a message that they should introspect.
And not only that, Seema, from what you were saying, the big media, one of the persistent questions that they were putting out is that, one of the questions that they were persistent about was that these are just not NEET students. The people who have come here are not students at all. They're not writing medical exams, right? Rather than seeing this protest as an expression of a population which is financially and economically burdened. And therefore, the NEET and the exam paper leak just became a symbol of that protest. Yeah. It is not the only reason for that protest. They were just not able to see it.
We keep talking about how Godi media brainwashes people, but that brainwashing really begins in the newsroom, especially with young reporters, because it's almost instilled in you that you have to heckle an MA baby going to the protest. You have to get that story. And then it becomes almost like a mission for a young reporter. A young reporter is just out there to get the story and file a story. But when it's instilled in you so deeply that, this is the right way to do a story, you have to expose that these people are Soros funded. You have to go there and heckle that communist politician. You have to go there and create this chasing confrontation kind of a sequence. When you do this day in, day out, you're obviously brainwashed. Even the reporters, the young reporters, are also brainwashed. And this kind of celebritization of every government event, it was exhausting beyond a point, because whether G20 is like a big event, but even a B20, even the budget, you would have big sets being put up. You almost had to prove that you are part of this kind of carnival, this government carnival, that the Prime Minister Modi waves at foreign media at G20. What a moment. And you're told as anchors to kind of, it's almost exhausting. How do you prove that you're happy about the Prime Minister waving at foreign media? How do you prove that, okay, this is a big moment for India? And the other thing is that the other reason why there is this kind of collapse of TV media also is because it has really become formulaic, particularly for our generation. You're talking about the editorial side of it, but also the format. That's just not how information or news is consumed anymore. Forget news, that's just not how content is consumed anymore. So it's become so formulaic that even a reporter on the ground, how OBs are done, or those lives are done, and how interviews are done, it's all become very formulaic. And that was also one of the reasons why I wanted to quit, because there's simply no scope for innovation. You want to, as a storyteller or as a reporter, you want to push the envelope, you want to do something new and innovative, but there's simply no scope, because these editors are so, they're in their own kind of echo chambers, not just editorially, but even in terms of what format works, what style of communication works, what style of storytelling works. So that also, I think, which is why this Instagram thing has also been disruptive, not only because there are people who are willing to tell the truth here, but also because of the formats. The TV format is simply too formulaic and just not fresh enough for people to kind of go and consume information. There's so many people came to us and said that we just want information. We wanted information about the protest. I'm not saying that, okay, it's one thing to color the protest and call them Khalistanis or whatever, but give out the information. People want to know what's happening there. At the end of the day, whatever editorialization you do, that is separate. But you're not even giving out information about what's happening there, because people really want to know that. So I think that's one of the things. And the last thing I also want to say here is that there is just too many resources are put in irrelevant stories. For example, the whole Karnataka thing, the transfer of power and Siddaramaiah, DK Shivkumar taking over. It's a great story, but does it warrant so many primetime shows? Like night after night, this is what happened, and there was a handshake, and there was a breakfast meet, and there was this and that. What is the heart of the story? The heart of the story is India's largest opposition party still democratic? Maybe you do a show on that. But then these too many irrelevant details becoming primetime every night is also frustrating, because people don't want to watch it. I understand that for Delhi editors, it's a very important story and it kind of makes them very excited, but it's not as exciting for the rest of us.
Don't get us started on the DK Shivkumar Siddaramaiah story.
No, but I want to just say you're absolutely right. And I think it's not only because of lazy journalism. They think it's easier to just stand and do live saying, oh, they had a breakfast meeting for the first 5 hours of the day. But it's also, there is an evil intention behind that, because it's a Congress government. So the message that they're sending out is, you vote Congress, you get instability. You'll never see this happen in a BJP ruled state. When there was a transition of power between Yediyurappa and Bommai himself didn't know till the last minute. When he was told, he was like, okay, is that so? Will I be? So that is the level of autocracy in one party. And that is all of these things, this coverage is towards that. And in fact, when I was in TV during the coalition government in Karnataka, every time I would get a Siddaramaiah tic-tac, as it's called, they would be very unhappy because he's standing and talking to you. What is the fun in that? Go, chase him, heckle. I'm like, I'm not doing that. He's standing and talking to me, making sense. So they hate that.
I want to just say, Vedanta, that this whole coverage of Karnataka, it goes on also because there are many vested interests, right? Somebody will say cover it, and they'll go on. Like in our newsroom, it's a joke. So the Karnataka Reporter Bureau reporters will ask us, should we cover? We are like, just put one story and walk away, because when they have to change, they will change. Why are we breaking our heads over it every day? they are going to change anyways, which we knew, and we were going on saying it'll happen. But that's the
How
whole.
does it change a reader or a viewer's life if we told 30 days ago that DK Shivkumar will become chief minister as opposed to the previous day?
Yeah.
What is the value add?
And also, I think this whole thing of formula, right, of how TV works. I worked in TV last in 2013. I don't think it has changed even one bit since even then. It's the same primetime show where everybody is fighting, everybody is screaming, and that's the easiest, laziest, and I think economical thing to do, right? Just have like multiple. And nowadays, you don't even send your OB-WAN. You're just asking them to come on Zoom or StreamYard or whatever. There's absolutely no cost for doing this. And they continue to do this.
So, no, I have this question, I think, to all of us. When these people come to you and say, this is my job, I need this job in this highly poisonous unit, how much, and this is a job, this is like a note question to self, how much quarter do you give them and say, yeah, they need a job, so they excuse? Isn't that the same thing as saying that I am like shedding the bones at a concentration camp, but it's my job, know what to do? So I think this is also a question we must actually think through this and tell our younger, older colleagues in big media that the choice they're making is not of also making chairs. Or, they're doing a very important job of narrative building, of arming the citizen with facts or misfacts, misinformation, which they're going to use as the basis for choices. So in a lot of ways, Indian democracy rests on this. Media, unfortunately, does play a big part. This whole information sphere, if you like. So what do you tell somebody who comes and says, ki main to naukri kar raha hu, I'll lose my job, ma'am, I have to do this?
But what I'm saying was two things. Whether it was even these RAF personnel, for example, a lot of it's the same thing. Whether it's an RAF personnel or a TV reporter, it's the same thing, because they you would say that okay, they have gotten orders from the top, so they're doing it. How much is their fault? I mean, where does the blame lie, and all of those questions. But I think some level of conscience and integrity. I mean, these are not very fashionable kind of words, but there is some level of conscience that as a professional or as a human being you would have, right? I mean, this is, we saw during the police brutality, for example, that in front of me, in fact, women were being beaten on their chest. Their heads were being broken. There was a man who was bleeding entirely because he got lathis on his head. So, I mean, okay, you've gotten orders to clear the road, but this is also kind of you're high on power suddenly because you've gotten this, you have the tacit approval from the top that you can go ahead and do whatever to clear the roads. Then you're high on power. Then then you smash people's heads and you break people's noses and whatever. Similarly, I think with TV media also, there was this very senior reporter. His name is Ravish Ranjan Shukla from NDTV, and he's a senior of mine. And by far, I think the most remarkable reporter I have ever met in my life. And he has done the kind of stories. I mean, he single-handedly, not single-handedly, but he was one of the first people who did the migrant exodus story during COVID. So, and he was sitting there and being sort of heckled and harassed by this crowd. And I thought that's such an unfortunate sight that you have an honest reporter, a conscientious reporter who has spent his entire life covering the stories of the people, and he is being heckled there. So who do you blame? I mean, do you blame that reporter? Do you blame, and because they have, I mean, not him, but there's so many people who don't have the privilege also of going independent. I mean, they have families to kind of support and they have EMIs to pay. So I'm a bit confused there as to.
Yeah, I'm also. And I don't know, have you guys thought about this? Because also, like, for me, the question would be, with great respect to all the good reporters in ghastly institutions, what are you doing there? And surely they can see it. If they're reporters, then they're able to report on there. They should be able to introspect and see what's happening. So,
Pooja has been putting her hands up and
reasonable.
I'm holding her.
No, but I last week ranted. I've been ranting to everybody I speak. I'll be reasonable. I'll make it quick. To extend your argument of people, reporters not making chairs, Seema, here's what I have to say. If you're a doctor, and if a doctor says, somebody came to me with a twisted ankle, but if I because my job demands me to amputate their leg because, there is more money in that surgery, and they're expecting, will the right wing or those who support these news channels and big media accept that argument? It's similar, right? You can't pass off saying it's my job. That's what's expected of me. Second point is, I mean, see, yes, people have bills to pay, and I completely understand and sympathize. But you're not doing journalism anyway. So might as well quit. Go join corp-com jobs. You'll get paid better and you'll have a better life, I can tell you that. You'll have more respect in what you're doing. They'll treat you much better than your company is treating you. Or join BJP. If you're being their cheerleaders every single day on TV, join BJP. They have more money to hire all of you jokers. And just let it be clear, right? No, I just said jokers. I didn't say anything
being
worse.
kind.
No, she's right. A lot of people have done that. There was somebody who also got the ticket recently. Was it Bihar? Vedanta, I forget who he was. A big anchor. Yeah, good for him.
No, they're all auditioning day in and day out for that job.
No, we know of a senior journalist who's looking for a Rajya Sabha seat,
Yes.
but we didn't write it because we are waiting for more details. But I'm just saying that, look, everybody has existential crisis. They have families to support. They have to make sure that they pay their EMIs, etc. But like Pooja was saying, then they should also know that if they continue in their jobs, being heckled in such a crowd is just
Occupational hazard.
Occupational hazard. It's going to happen to you because you are part of this. There is no other way.
Is that, so a lot of people were like saying that, does that mean that journalists such as ourselves should be heckled and beaten up if we go to a rally of people who we don't agree with, as it were? But this is not about that, which I want to draw a line. These people are actually talking about violence, division, and supporting ideas that actually speak about almost the dismemberment of India and about the de-citizenizing of almost half your population, if all the marginalized were to be set aside. So it's not about being beaten up by those who disagree with you. It's about what they are standing for. And then to expect all the niceties and courtesies when they set out thinking that, oh my God, all the, the TRPs are here. We have to cover this. I think therefore their argument that, oh, we'll beat you up when you come to cover a BJP summit or when you come to cover a satsang or something. That's wrong, because we're not arguing that people should be beaten up. We're not arguing that the BJP should be beaten up or the RSS should be beaten up. We're saying that please register yourself. Please follow the law, the Constitution of India. So this desire to set it up as a contest, right, between two equals who are, who are battling, and therefore, please don't hit me when I come to your camp. That's a very wrong and a devious argument, because we are not like insurrectionists. We are standing for all words of the preamble of the Constitution. I stand for that. I am not like saying I'm right or left or anything. If the words secular, socialist, democratic, equality, justice trigger you, just too bad. That's the kind of journalism we're doing. So I think that's something independent media should also like assert and say out, that this is not about beating up the other. You're being treated badly because you argue for these methods. You talk about lynching in a particularly kind way. You're talking about some animals being more equal than others.
And I think just to add to that on the agreement and disagreement bit, more than that, I mean, we covered the protest also critically. It's not as if we were just there to we were not cheerleaders even of the Cockroach Janata Party. I mean, we covered them critically also. We asked them as to where they were when the students were being beaten up. Why were they not marching with them? Why were they inside in that little truck? So, there were, nobody's above questioning. So we questioned them as well, and we covered them critically also. And there was a point, in fact, where Priyanshi, my co-founder, was actually covering something, and she was speaking to a protester who said that I'm suddenly feeling leaderless because I am getting hit and the police is kind of cornering me, but there's no, there's nobody from the Cockroach Janata Party. And then suddenly there were all these people who started heckling Priyanshi, saying that this is Godi media. So I'm saying that it's also about I should have the space to cover everything critically. And so, yeah, I mean, it's also, we should also not be intolerant.
Correct. But cover everything critically, but as they say, under the guise of neutrality. We should not be objective. So neutrality is rubbish. There's no such thing as being neutral. We stand at a particular place, all of us, where history, time, ourselves has brought us. To be cognizant of that, recognize it, and from that lens, sort of examine things critically.
Yeah. My professor, for example, at ACJ used to say that you should throw words like neutrality and balance out of the window. You should champion words like justice or liberty or freedom, and
or objectivity also is okay to be able to see. So in fact, a very interesting thing, somebody said that right wing was trolling Ajit Anjum, saying that, oh, look at him, crowd ne besti kara di uski. Then these guys said, because the crowd apparently there was some Godi kind of person who was, They said, no, but Ajit Anjum gave that guy full space. And it's his podcast. No, he has to press 2 buttons to be able to edit that bit. He didn't. So they said, like, you losers, he's not being heckled. There is a certain situation, there's a crowd moment, and he's captured it for you. That's what we want media to do, right? To just frame things and to bring it home.
No, I think this false equivalence, Seema, I've been noticing where people are saying, oh, you guys are condemning violence, but ending every sentence with but. We condemn violence, but we are also asking the media certain questions. That means tomorrow, if you go into a right-wing crowd, you can be beaten up. Is that okay?
I don't think there's equivalent, yes.
Yeah, that is not, because I'm not doing the same work as these people. I'm not dehumanizing anyone, including the people that I'm highly critical of. I don't want anybody beaten up. I don't call anybody Khalistani, Pakistani, Chinese. I only put out a story recently of funds which are gotten by certain organizations, which I have papers to prove. And therefore, I'm asking, why have you gotten these funds? We don't do any of these things. You know, I keep telling Pooja, when Yedurappa was the chief minister of BJP, we were also reporting about potholes and roads and everything, just like any other normal newsroom would do. It's only after Bommai came in that
We had to
things
look at
change here
communal policy.
dramatically here also. So it's not like we want to keep doing some of these stuff. We want to do other things also, but you are forcing us to also keep talking about this, right?
No, just look at, it's also because that's their priority, right? They say that you're not allowing parliament to function because you want to discuss the violence against protesters. What is it that you want to do when the parliament is functioning? Come up with a bill, Vande Mataram bill, where you're criminalizing people for not reciting. So that shows your priority as well.
Seema, I want to end with just asking you, as far as the protesters are concerned, though the government gave this promise, do you foresee that there would be a lot of action against them?
I'll answer the second one first. Yes. I think very often leopard spots, there'll be a deep desire to actually scare and terrorize. And I think knowing the Modi government, we've got enough good experience, 12 years, is that they don't want this to continue. And while E20 ethanol is a bit of a parody, but the fact that people have figured some kind of a blueprint of gather people, protest, exert pressure, express yourself, it has consequences, good consequences. So you can move stuff. So far, the BJP had destroyed that equation. It was not equal to 2AB. It was, that equation had broken down. This was not translating into people's voice. You thought, just come there, bloody vote, and then you keep quiet. We control you. We get 36% of the vote, and then we control your lives for the next 5 years. That was the thing, that you'd actually bottled it up. That has come out. So I think they would try and do that. I actually don't have a theory, but I'll just go back on history. What history tells us that there are moments that come, the history of India particularly, in all these very powerful authoritarian governments, even of the Congress type, whether it is Mrs. Gandhi or Rajiv Gandhi's spectacular big run. Unfortunately, there comes a time when there's a crack, and that crack is not a slope, but it is precipitous. And I think that we may have reached that point in the Modi government, because this is not just 2 years after 2024, which it is. It's a minority government. Second year on, after being a minority government, people see it as the 12th year in government. So there is all kinds of distress, agony, and the economy is not getting anywhere. They seem to have no good ideas because their fundamentals in how India should be run, they're at odds with India. And I think finally the contradictions are coming to roost. I think it's a great tribute to Indian democracy that somebody like Narendra Modi was voted to power. And in 2014, the ruling party, which was in power for 10 years, run by a brilliant prime minister, brilliant man, Barack Obama would stand up and he'd walk in, is reduced to 44 seats. I think it's a tribute to Indian democracy that he got elected. But now the same democratic thing about our plural democracy and things that have been put into action are catching up. So I think the chickens are coming home to roost. I don't have any dramatic kind of hypotheses that will end in a day and all that. But I think the government is being forced into making mistakes. The thing about forced errors in tennis. So I think you're seeing some of that. And it remains to be seen how much political parties are able to, parliament, etc., are able to absorb these energies and take it from there. But you're confronting a whole bunch of new protesters, new kids on the block in all senses of the term, a new metaphor of saying the same things, new angst, and there is no new thing that they have to, except for control, and more control, and children go straight back into the egg. I want to seal the egg. But, Humpty Dumpty could never be really put back together. So I think that point has been reached, and it just means more busy nights for all of us, maybe more eruptions like this, but definitely a lot more turmoil before we hit a democratic solution, maybe 2029. I don't foresee a midterm poll, but I wouldn't be surprised if things force it in some way.
I just want to end by saying that the Congress also doesn't seem to be understanding how things are changing, looking at how its own governments, where the states that it is in power, has been reacting to the protesters. In Bengaluru, a case has been filed against an activist who held a placard which says, we talked about Umar Khalid, Sharjeel Imam, and said Bangalore police ukhad le. What will happen if somebody writes Bangalore police ukhad le on a poster? Will Bangalore police be actually ukhadified? She's been booked. In Kerala, many protesters have been booked. So I think they also need to really watch out for, do actions match words?
No, I think
Not
the
on the
problem,
same scale, but yes.
The problem is, I think when BJP is in power, there is a trickle-down effect. Instructions come down all the way, which is why we've seen policemen also behaving in a very communal way. But I think in Congress, for example, we saw even when Siddaramaiah was in power, in Parliament, Priyanka Gandhi was talking about support to Palestine. And here they were beating up protesters who were coming out in support of Palestine. So I think that is the problem. I don't know if it is because of certain instructions. There's one over-enthusiastic policeman who just thought he should pull out the poster. But two quick points to end with. One fear I have is that the BJP is its most dangerous when they're pushed against the wall, with the backs towards the wall. And I worry how they will now come back and kind of hunt down people who they think can threaten that image they'd built. Now, the positive for me out of all of this is the young people have broken down that reverence, that entire facade of reverence of Modi. So I'm hoping political parties take a cue from this. Their BJP's allies, like Chandrababu Naidu, we all know might not completely wholeheartedly endorse everything that the BJP and Modi does. But he does so because he thinks the nation is with them. That's the general mood. So let's go with the flow. And we'll get, of course, some transactional benefits in the bargain.
So I just want one last point that, we've been seeing how suddenly in the BJP you have this realization that now Instagram needs to be captured. They're reaching out to influencers, reaching out to media platforms like us as well. But I think just sort of one appeal that this is no reinvention. Please don't do this delulu selulu, because it's the biggest disrespect to the movement. It's the biggest disrespect to the thousands of people who gathered there. You cannot this is not you extending an olive branch, or this is not you trying to communicate them. You're still talking down to them by saying that, we can woo them by throwing in these dilulu selulu type of words. It's the biggest disrespect to the movement, I believe. And they're still getting it wrong. This entire movement was also about some kind of egalitarianism, some kind of equalization, whether it's the TV anchor. Again, there's such a, you don't see them as one of you, because they're sitting in their studios, and the way they talk also, they're so cut off, from how we speak. And basically just be authentic, communicate directly with the people, be open to questions. I think that would be reinventing your communication strategy, and not delulu selulu.
No, I think, Vedanta, the problem is who's delulu, right? Instead of changing the messaging, instead of changing the narrative, the BJP's biggest curse is the narrative that it built over the years. That's actually hit the BJP back. So instead of changing the narrative, they're just changing the platform. I will say the same crap in a different platform with my nose into the camera. That's the only difference here. That's not what they should be doing, right? So I think the BJP has got the wrong message. It's not the platform that's the problem. It's a message that's the problem.
It's the politics that's the problem. Yeah, sorry.
And the politics. Hey, I also do that, so I'm not blaming that camera angle. Okay, so we'll go to the recommendations. Pooja, what is yours?
I mean, you plugged the part I wanted to talk about, News Laundry's investigation. I think that's fantastic. There was one article I read in Politico about how bots have taken over our lives since 2016. We can put the link. It also got me thinking about a lot of things about what's happening, how internet has been captured. And a very boring, to a lot of people, recommendation is watch what happens in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. Those discussions that you've written off as boring, I think are very important. Listen to what people are saying, how they're saying it, and then make your judgments. Yeah.
Yeah, I have this thing, I must confess, I've not been able to read it, but it's a very promising book. It's called The World of the Cold War, 1945 to 1991 by Vladislav Zubok. It's from a Soviet point of view. So just the Cold War, and particularly as we were like all obsessing over the US-Iran war, before this thing caught up with us, or were forced to catch up with it. So this is quite an interesting take on how he saw the World War from a Soviet point of view. He left, and he's almost a dissident of the Soviet regime, but it's a very good take, and it's very nicely written. It looks very intimidating, but it's great. And the second recommendation I have is a very good podcast, which is between Sucharita Tyagi, and Rahul Desai and Ishita on can cinema be cut off from politics? And it's a take on this protest and really examining if films can really be cut away. And it's not like some highfalutin kind of discussion. It's very much in the age of Dhurandhar, Main Wapas Aaunga, and this whole spectrum of cinema that we confront. So I'd recommend that.
So I have two recommendations. One is, and both are perhaps relevant in this conversation about protests, etc. One is Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail, which I think is very relevant because, we keep talking about protesters as anarchists and, people who are causing disruption and disrupting regular life. And he very articulately sort of talks about how it's important to at times disrupt negative peace, as he calls it, for a more positive peace. So it's a very inspiring and insightful. It's an essay, but I think every Gen Z should read it because it really talks about the importance of protests and why it's important to kind of disrupt regular life at times for something bigger and for a more positive peace. And my second recommendation is this YouTube video, which is on Muniza Hashmi, who is Faiz Ahmed Faiz's daughter. She has put out this lovely kind of explainer of Hum Dekhenge and why Faiz wrote it and what the story behind it and what it meant to Faiz. Because, during these protests also, you had Professor Nandita Narayan, sing Hum Dekhenge on the stage, and she was trolled for it. And just because there's this one line which says, Bas naam rahega Allah ka, but what does it really mean? And why Faiz decided to write that and why it continues to be such a relevant cry for justice. So yeah, those are my two recommendations.
Can I just say one line in the end? Kangana Ranaut, who called Gen Z gutter generation, should listen to this podcast. I think Vedanta has been a fantastic example of what Gen Z thinks and can say and can do. So more power to you.
I have two recommendations. One is the podcast video by Anurag Minus Verma. It's around 2 hours. It's an interview with Sagar, who's a reporter with the Caravan. It's about why reservations are necessary. I think Pooja's LME this week is also on this reservation hatao andolan nonsense. So do listen to that podcast. The other podcast I have has nothing to do with politics. It's called Instant Classics. It's on Spotify. It's a paid podcast after 2 or 3 episodes. It's basically 2 women sit and discuss history. And the one I listen to is the Odyssey. They talk about Emily Wilson's translation, etc. of Homer's Iliad. It's a very nice podcast. Just 2 women who are into books, talking about books. Seema, listen to it for sure. The rest of the audience too, yeah.
It's a personal recommendation only to Seema.
She's the only one who takes my podcast recommendations seriously and listens to them. Thank you very much, both of you, for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so before we actually wrap up, I'm going to read a few letters. This is from Ashwati Kallari. She writes thoughts on TNM South Central and the ongoing protests. She writes, I write to you with the same turmoil many of us are going through today in the face of the ongoing protests and the realization. I'm from Palakkad, Kerala, and I'm now working as a scientist in the UK. That's my hometown, by the way.
Are you sure you're not classmates with
No,
her?
no,
or-
no. I've always loved science and still remember the constant feeling of my future not fully being in my grasp while growing up, considering the state of education and science that has persisted in our country for long. I eventually migrated abroad for my higher studies, but I'm acutely aware of how even this was only possible due to my caste and caste privileges. So she writes about living as an immigrant for a decade. I watched with helplessness the issues plaguing India and the growing realization that a return might not be in my future if I want to do what I love while also not staying silent against injustice. I'm in awe of those students fighting to build their future where they stand. At the same time, I do not wish to romanticize this struggle and think teenage children should be facing tear gas and pellets, not that there is anyone who deserves that. This is a generation that has been failed by their societal guardians. Then it's a long letter. She also writes, in all this chaos, when we struggle to find hope, I want to mention how you and your team's incredible bravery and commitment to telling the truth is truly inspiring. We have suffered an epidemic of spinelessness when it comes to news media, but your institution is among the few others that go against the tide and bring us real reporting. After constantly feeling restless and helpless to change anything meaningfully, the least I could do is finally become a subscriber and contribute in a small way to your journalism. I'm only sorry it took so long, but with all my education loans and studies, I could only afford it now. That's okay, Ashwati. Thank you very much. Oh, she said, I also enjoy your recommendations and the occasional disagreements you have with Pooja Prasanna, among many others. Yeah. Thank you so much, Ashwati. Now to the next letter, which is from Manan Shah. Manan does write to us pretty frequently. Manan says, I'm a News Minute subscriber and I was curious, why do you guys not run a dedicated feature on commerce in your independent media viewpoint? Your most business journalism in India serves one of four audiences: investors, startup ecosystem, large corporates, personal finance. Very little serves the person actually running the MSME up to a large. Okay. Now, the problem, Manan, is we have very few journalists, first thing.
And none of us understand.
None of us understand. See, a lot of issues which small organizations face is it's the top editorial, right? If they don't understand something, it's very difficult to have a trickle-down effect because we end up hiring the same kind of people. That's one issue. Yeah. I understand what you're saying. We have been trying to do some stories, but I know that we are badly lacking in this. Let's see. Maybe we can try do better. We must hire someone specifically for that, or it's not going to happen. Okay, so now the next letter is from Animesh. He writes, I write this as somewhat of a regular viewer of South Central. A bit of info about me before I explain my concerns about your podcast. I'm from an Adivasi Oron Christian family from Jharkhand, with some extended family members in Andhra, Tamil Nadu, and Andaman Nicobar Islands. So he has then written about which parties he likes, which parties he doesn't like. About your podcast, I think you are too ideological. You have already formed your opinions about various people and parties, and you have no room in your mind for surprises in this world. As we can all agree that the history of this world is not linear or black and white. There are all kinds of ups and downs. Nothing is permanent. Change is the only thing that tends to stay. Okay, Pooja. That's it.
That's it. Yes and no. Yeah, we are a little sometimes, but the latest protest is an example. We weren't sure of it at the beginning. We'll admit to that. We weren't dissing them, but we were just
We were also dissing them.
as an organization. Yeah, many people said many things, but I'm saying we were apprehensive. We wanted to see how it pans out, and now we realize that it's a lot more than the people who started it and the kind of movement. So we did change our opinion. We are capable of humility in admitting that we messed up.
Yeah.
When I say me, I mean me, not that. Yeah.
Okay, so the next lecture is from Sharvana Utay Kumar. He talks about my recommendation in the 79th episode. Basically, I recommend an article from Alt News about a particular place in Bihar where there were a lot of Muslims, but eventually when the votes were counted, all the votes went for BJP and they're like, hello, we didn't vote for the BJP. So he writes, yesterday I was reading Dhanya's recommendation and today morning my friend shared this news which was about EVMs found burnt in Bengal. So he asked, but how come the EVMs for every constituency can be used like this? How is it democracy? Just wanted to share with you guys. You guys have connected a lot of dots long ago. Seeing it abruptly for the first time made me scared. Regards, Ravanan. So basically, he's telling us why to do more work on EVMs. We have tried to.
Still
I think 2-3 years ago, we had published this investigative piece on the VVPAT. It was by Parth and Neil Madhav. Do read it. But see, a lot of things around EVMs are still in the realm of conspiracy theories.
And the
Unless
system is so opaque.
Yes, the problem is system is so opaque. The Election Commission of India keeps saying that they are impenetrable, but I don't think journalistically we have enough proof to say anything otherwise. We do know that electoral rolls are being messed up, people are being deleted, removed, etc., which is what we've been covering. But this is something that's always there in the back of our minds. Priya Kanakaraj says recommendations for app improvement. I have been a News Minute subscriber for the past 2 years. I really enjoyed the Gen Z episode and I'm a big fan of Let Me Explain. Regarding the discussion on the journalists being heckled at the protest site, I fully align with Pooja's view as it was deserved. However, as a resident of California, I disagree with the perspective she shared months ago on Hafta regarding Indians living abroad. You must have said something rude. You must have said something rude about all Indians. She doesn't mean all Indians.
No, but I don't
Priya.
mean all Indians living abroad. I think I referred particularly to those who come and cheer Modi and tell us sitting somewhere else to vote for Modi.
Yeah.
But I might have gone slightly over.
Like
Excuse me.
always. Yeah. Additionally, I would like to request a voice option for your app. Since I listen to your podcast while at the gym or work, having an audio version of the written reports would be very helpful. Yeah, I think we are looking at that, Priya. In fact, for the long form, we used to have, but I think we'll have some sort of AI thing which reads out stories. Thank you very much. So that's all for the letters. This week, we will read more letters. So write to us at southcentral@thenewsminute.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Remember, we drop every Friday the episode. Thank you, Pooja. Thank you to our producer, Akshay Lal. Thank you to production assistant, Ajay, who's also become a video editor now. So he's editing videos. Thank you to Ria and Anaka, who do our socials, and Sukanya Shaji, who listens to every episode and sends us suggestions in between on what to say, what not to say. Thank you very
And
much.
cheering us on too.